lives come with ups and downs, detours, realignments, readjustments, and sometimes rebuilding whole new careers as well.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today I'm joined by Dr. Renata Gomes, Chief Scientific Officer at NHS Blood and Transplant.
What's the worst that can happen is that I get told no, but if I don't try, the answer is always going to be no anyway. Was that their biggest regret was about the things that they didn't do. It was not about the things they did, even if they failed or made mistakes. I think we are expected to always look very sad and stressed and not even know how to smile. Working in areas of conflict, including war zones, that's when, you really have a crash course, deep, intense boot camp. True leadership is tested under extremely austere conditions, because under those conditions no one cares about your job title and they don't care how much or how little you earn.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today I'm joined by Dr. Renata Gomes, Chief Scientific Officer at NHS Blood and Transplant. Renata is a trailblazer in medical science, breaking stereotypes of what a scientist should look like, leading pioneering research that saves lives and showing us how to forge our own paths with resilience and purpose. From tackling imposter syndrome to redefining identity beyond our professions, she brings both expertise and authenticity to the conversation. If you're interested in forging your own path, how to tackle imposter syndrome and being the only one, how experiences shape who you are and where you go, and profession versus identity, then this episode is for you. Hi, Dr. Renata. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to speak to me.
Of course. I'm so excited for today's conversation. Do you know what? You're actually the first scientist I've actually had on the show. So this is really exciting. This is going to be a different take. So I'm really, yeah.
I feel that it comes with great responsibility.
We're all good. Well, I know I've given a bit of an introduction to you, but could you just tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, of course. I think the first thing you might have noticed is that I'm foreign born, and I'm Portuguese by birth, British by naturalisation. And I have to say that although I've been working and living in the UK for quite some decades, I think I'm still genetically unable to adapt to the British weather. My favourite pastimes involve walking the dog. So if you ever see a little four-paw friend walking behind me, that's the dog. And walking with a husband, of course, too, in the great outdoors. I'm a medical and forensic scientist by training. I actually first learned about human anatomy as a child. And that was thanks to a great uncle of mine who was a coroner. I think I'm really a scientist in and out. And like you mentioned, I've served as the Chief Scientific Officer. I really spent most of my career exploring how the human body and the self can help each other. And the sense is really trying to understand what makes us survive, what helps us thrive, and how we can use knowledge and evidence to better patient outcomes, really trying to make sure we always have good healthcare. Really outside of work, I like traveling. I drink too much coffee. I never successfully kept a houseplant alive for more than a couple of weeks. I'm an avid supporter of the emergency forces, in particular armed forces and our veterans, of course. And I think for me personally, I'm also quite proud of having been born in Portugal, also living in the UK, and just being born in a democracy, which wasn't quite what happened to most of my family. So, yeah, that's me. It's just another day.
Yeah. No, it's such an interesting background and such an important role that you're playing, actually. And so for those that don't know, actually, because I don't want to assume everybody is from the UK, NHS is the National Health Service in England. So this is a big deal, everyone. So your career, actually, Renata, hasn't followed a traditional straight line. So what choices or turning points helped you carve out your own path?
I think if you think about my career path, it's been a little bit more like a series of scenic detours rather than just driving in a motorway straight ahead. And a lot of it has been really because the curiosity often pulled me in different directions. I trained as a scientist and I'm always fascinated by evidence and knowledge. And my biggest fascination was how to transform and use that into day-to-day benefits. So that meant that I've worked as a scientist, I've worked as a chief scientific officer, I've worked as a chief executive, and I had so many roles. I would say in different sectors, but in a sense was always doing the same evidence, science and knowledge to improve healthcare. I have to say that often these things can look very scary, and at times I was using knowledge and science changing from subjects like neuroscience to cardiology and moving them into innovation. And these are different fields. It looked scary, even risky, but I think I've focused quite a lot on transferable skills and always trying to solve problems in new ways. In particular in healthcare, we've had some problems that have been with us for generations, even centuries. And that's really is what kept me moving forward. And I have to say that what might appear each time like a detour, it allowed me to develop a new set of skills and see things from a different perspective. And it's quite interesting helping to build diversity and diversifying myself within quite a diverse environment already. And I find diversity is a privilege as well.
Yeah. And do you know what? As you spoke about that, I always say you're lucky if you get to work in a role or a job that you're truly passionate about, which I can see is you're really passionate about. And another key thing I think that you mentioned there that is important for people to remember in their role or throughout their career is that transferable skills, because I feel like sometimes people might want to change roles or pivot or what have you, and I think that can feel daunting, but remembering those transferable skills and kind of mapping those out is important, and you just speaking about it there just shows actually the difference it makes.
Absolutely, and just remember those transferable skills when you shift or pivot in a direction career-wise, you are bringing those skills with diversity, because let's say you're changing the community that you're working with, or perhaps even the industry. You come with a diversity of experience and knowledge because industries are different, and it is always very good to have people with different perspectives coming in. So I think diversity has a lot of meaning, and it means different things, and we have to embrace the diversity of diversity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've touched on there transferable skills, diversity in diversity, and the different perspectives that it brings. When it comes to opportunities, how do you identify and create opportunities when they don't seem so obvious?
I think it is about thinking and reflecting, and even having discussions with your colleagues, your peers, and your community. Because something that doesn't seem obvious to you, it might be obvious to others. And discussion and reflection often allows you to assimilate information, to process your thoughts and your emotions, and things do come into line. Again, it all sounds like a scientific experiment again, but a lot of this goes back to the basics of biology and neuroscience. And I think it goes into thinking as well that in terms of careers, it's not like assembly lines, because careers are built, developed and kept by human beings, which is us. And us as human beings, we are not one size fits all. We have lives, and lives come with ups and downs, detours, realignments, readjustments, and sometimes rebuilding whole new careers as well. So I think we need to take all of that in consideration, and being patient with ourselves as well, because the opportunities and the challenges are often something that's down to us. And I don't quite believe in luck. I think we make our you know possibility does play a big part in it, and chance as well, but I think we make our own luck and we make things happen ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know what? I liked when you touched on initially having the discussion with other people and they might not see what you see. And I say that because I remember I've been lucky in two roles where my manager has seen something in me or, you know, something of my skill set that aligns with an opportunity that I wouldn't have seen myself. And then they've kind of pushed me to go for it. So I really, it's important. I think that part of discussion and getting other perspectives is so important.
Absolutely. And also, it is about that diversity of experience. And
Yeah.
I have noticed a lot of that in now that, I've been around for a little while and I'm a little bit more experienced and more senior than others. I've noticed that with the younger, not saying they're young, but they are younger staff. Uh, we often can spot talent, and we become used to think strategically, and we can see opportunity and where someone can fit. And sometimes a lot of that goes down to people having personality. And it's very interesting also when we start talking about gender, because I find that females tend to be less self-confident of trying for something, risking it, whereas others may not. So what you've just described, I was in positions where I had managers doing exactly the same to me, and then I've made sure that I support others in that way as well, because I think I also believe a lot in paying it forward, and I think that was what happened to me when I was a young trainee. And I have been very fortunate in my career to be surrounded by people, by leaders who always wanted to generate workers and people who were human and always better than they were. And I think that was an absolute privilege.
Yeah, you're lucky when you get that. I think it's important that we acknowledge when you just touched on gender. There are stats that back that up. I don't remember exactly what they are now, but I know even when it pertains to applying for roles or going for a role, the percentage that women feel they need to have the requirements is significantly increased for them to go for the role over their male counterparts. So there's actually stats that back up what you're saying there.
Oh, absolutely. And I had to go through that journey myself. My younger self would look at a job description that I would find really interesting. If I didn't meet all of the criteria to at least 99%, I'll be like, I'm not going to waste anybody's time. Whereas colleagues or other applicants that perhaps didn't even meet half of the criteria would go for it. And I started developing this thought of what's the worst that can happen is that I get told no, but if I don't try, the answer is always going to be no anyway.
Yeah. Do you know what? Yeah, I was going to say, this is crazy because I literally just wrote a post on this, right? I was reflecting and I said, you miss 100% of the opportunities you don't take. You know, you don't get, you don't ask. So what you're saying is just so absolutely true.
And just to add on to that, it was quite ironic because, and these are studies, like you said.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by evidence and a lot of history, and in particular, history of evidence and data and analysis. And just recently, a group of scientists did some throwback on some historical landmark studies. And there was a longitudinal study that where people that were born in the 60s got interviewed, and then they got followed up over the decades. And the biggest thing that came out about what people regretted most in the decade of the 80s. Doesn't mean it was the people born in the 80s, it was the people that were living in the 80s when they were interviewed, was that their biggest regret was about the things that they didn't do. It was not about the things they did, even if they failed or made mistakes. It was about what they didn't do. And I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. And that's why that awareness and conversations like this to just bring it to consciousness, I think, are so important. So, this is probably a call to action for anyone that's probably seen an opportunity or you're scared to do something. Just go for it. As Renata says, you make your own luck. So, yeah. So, we're going to touch a little bit on demystifying what a scientist looks like. And this is an interesting one because even I myself have to admit that if I look, when you watch films or when you think about it in your head, right? Or even growing up, you think of scientists like in the white straight jacket or something like that. And I don't know, but that's more of a, I would say, a stereotype. So when people picture a scientist, as I mentioned, they often do imagine a very like narrow stereotype. How have you challenged those perceptions?
Oh, you're absolutely right on that. So there is the cliche that all scientists have messy hair and really no interest in their appearance. And I think these days scientists having messy hair or politicians gets a bit confused, but they are very, very different professions, I must say. I think is a little bit like, what does a doctor look like? What does a nurse, a midwife, uh, a fireman looks like? Is a bit like, what does a scientist look like? We look like anything and everything. And in my particular case, and like many female scientists, I'm quite feminine. I have to confess, I absolutely love a good manicure, and I do take the time because my role permits me to have a manicure. That's not the case for everyone in healthcare. I spend an hour every month having my nails painted, and it's quite relaxing, and it's also some self-care time as well. And I think that just brings about to show that science just needs many faces, not just one, being feminine, being not feminine, the different types of like. You most likely will find me going around work, corridors, labs, and so on, when we have to, of course, fully covered with lab coats or scrubs. But normally you will find me wearing dresses or wearing pink and some sort of colours. And I think for me what's really important is that I want to see the young people and the population in general that scientists don't have to look or sound in a certain way. And I think there is a lot of correlation of what the scientist looks like, how it behaves because of all of the movies. I think we are expected to always look very sad and stressed and not even know how to smile, these sort of things.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know what though? And it's such an interesting role, but I feel like for me anyway, it's not every day I come across a scientist. So that's why what you see
Well,
online and stuff is.
see, that's probably what you think. Let me give you some facts. We are talking about the UK, so we have this thing which is the NHS, the National Health System. So for anybody from abroad listening, this means is what we call the free healthcare system. In the UK, our healthcare system, everyone's diagnosis, whether it's from a blood test to more serious things, 80% of all our work is done by healthcare scientists. So if you go to a hospital or even to your GP, so your general practitioner's practice, you might have seen, bumped, or walked past a scientist. You just don't know he's a scientist. So you might know a lot of scientists, you just don't know they're scientists.
Yeah.
Sometimes being a scientist is a little bit like being an analyst.
Yeah.
We just live in the shadows, or often behind a computer, a data analysis system, or a bench, So who knows? Next time you go around, just ask.
Have a look. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I like that. So, um, you kind of just touched on it in your last answer, when you're talking about the importance of people seeing that not everybody's the same, essentially. But why is representation important in science, and what impact does it have on younger generations aspiring to join the field?
I think that is important to showcase really that possibility is everywhere, and possibility needs to be contagious. And I think when it comes to science and gender, that's quite important, in particular for younger women and girls to see that, if she can do it, so can I. And that sort of representation unlocks all sorts of imagination as well. And I think when it comes to that, I've really learned that the hard work is what matters so much more than labels. Because I've seen brilliant people who achieve very little because they are complacent, people that look like scientists but they are not. And also I've seen people with quite significant challenges that absolutely nailed it and achieved beyond what their wildest dreams. And that was all very much because they observed, worked hard, and particularly stayed honest. And I think when you combine the transparency with the hard work and effort, that is more often than not the key to success.
I think you have to see, like, if you see yourself in somebody, that's why it's important to see somebody that looks like you, if that makes sense, to realize that, oh, okay, I can do it too. And so when it comes to normalizing the idea that scientists can come from all backgrounds and walks of life, outside of people, the importance of people seeing that, oh, there's someone else that looks like me that does that. Is there any other ways also that you think we can continue to normalize that scientists can come from different walks of life?
Yes, I think it's more about awareness and visibility. Like, you said the scientists may not be very visible, but also the understanding of what a scientist do. Like, for example, where I currently work, we employ over 1,513 scientists. So I think we're close to 1,700 at the moment, but I can't be sure. Need to check the numbers. There we go again. Precision is part of the business. But it is also then for people to understand what do scientists actually do, because when they realize some scientists do blood tests, some scientists look into doing policies and pathways to keep operations safe. And when people start understanding what the role means, then they start saying, oh, I actually really like that sort of thing. So perhaps I could become a scientist.
Which is key, because I'm learning as we're talking. And the fact that it feels almost like scientist is almost like the umbrella term. And then there are like the different roles that sit under it, and they can be completely different.
Absolutely. It's just in healthcare. In healthcare, there is over 20 different disciplines as scientists. And but then if you think mathematicians can be scientists as well, depends on what sort of roles they are employed. In today's day and age, there is a lot of analysts out there. So from data to digital computer science, which is doing a lot of the artificial intelligence. Like, for example, places like Google, they will employ a huge amount of scientists, and some of them are working on social media. And you wouldn't associate these things, would you, normally?
Oh, you mean like machine learning? I've seen people with the title machine learning scientist. They're classed as scientists.
Absolutely. That is,
Oh,
most of those people either trained or educated in computer science, mathematics, even chemistry. A lot of about science is learning methods and actually quite a discipline. And then you spend a lifetime applying it for different solutions. So, system analysts, data analysts. You probably got scientists next to you nearly every day at work. You just haven't realized it.
It's coming to my mind now, actually. Now, yeah, I can see that. And I've actually worked with them. So that's so interesting. So I think it's so important to everyone, kind of the experiences that we've, lived experiences are important in terms of how they impact us. And so I thought we could just touch a bit about how experiences shape who you are and where you go. So looking back, what experiences most shaped your interest in science and approach to leadership?
I think I have to say my great uncle was stuck with me because my parents were busy, my grandparents were busy, so he was babysitting me, and he had to teach his medical students. So he just sat me in the classroom, and I just sat there and listened. And next thing I knew, I was learning human anatomy as a 6-year-old kid. By the time I was 8, as a joke, when he gave the tests to his students, I did them as well, and I was passing them, so he was quite pleased with that. But of course, there is always family influence, and that was completely by chance. But I think as I grew, living in different countries and adapting to change has really helped me continue to develop my continuous sense of curiosity, but also to question with respect, because it's like doing anything in life, whether you succeed or not, as long as you do it respectfully, I don't see that there would ever be a problem. And living in the different countries is quite humbling. I've lived and worked in Nordic countries. I've worked for long periods of time, so sometimes for 6 to 9 months in countries in the Middle East, and even in some areas in Africa. And that really shaped my interest in science further, because in the UK and mainly in Europe, we are quite a privileged environment, and even develop science for healthcare to better patient outcomes is very different from when you are in countries where have significant infrastructure and general problems like poverty was the day-to-day in those areas. And I have to say that what influenced me most of it in terms of science and leadership as well has been actually working in areas of conflict, including war zones. That's when you really have a crash course, deep, intense boot camp on how to really embed into diversity, adapt and adjust. But I actually see that in a sense, adversities can be one of life's greatest privileges. In particular, if we come out of it the other side and the positive side. And I think true leadership is tested under extremely austere conditions, because under those conditions, no one cares about your job title, and they don't care how much or how little you earn. What really matters is the trust, and you earn your trust by being consistent, transparent, and basically being honest and working hard. That's how you earn your trust in those environments, and that really is the basis of making anything possible, even the things that you think would be impossible. Yes, that's really been the guiding star of my leadership development. Might sound extreme, but
Well, I feel like you've had experiences that most people probably don't ever, like when you talk about being in conflict zones, war zones, I don't think many people, that's something that they experience.
and you know what? And I hope they never have to.
Yeah.
But adversity can come in many shapes and forms. It's not just in war zones, and sometimes the most profound adverse circumstances come from personal situations. I mean, and some very happy moments can be extremely challenging to people. I normally see that in females and women. For example, for many women, the motherhood is so exciting, but is so challenging. And I see that every day, and my kudos to all of these warriors.
Yeah. Also, you've just highlighted, I think, experiences shape you from so young. I mean, you talked about from 8 years old, and then I think it keeps evolving as you go through your experiences. When you then spoke about actually as you went through your career, that's kind of guided your leadership. So I feel like it just starts from so young, isn't it?
It does, and I think there is a lot of research and work that shows that a lot of yourself is shaped in your what's called in your early years while you're young.
Yeah.
But I think that there comes a really hard point in life, and I don't know if that's when we're teenagers or young adults, I don't know when, where we are shaped by where we were born, how we are culturally raised. I spent most of my life in the UK, but I was culturally raised as Portuguese, and it's very different, and it happens to a lot of my friends that are British born, but they are culturally Nigerian because that's where the families come from.
Yeah.
And I think is about developing a skill and considering how, yes, we are shaped early on, but then how do we keep ourselves open-minded and willing to adjust and adapt, not to lose our diversity, but to better ourselves and just to get what we want out of ourselves as well. It's always a lot of thinking that goes on, and it
Yeah.
can be tiring.
Yeah. So I feel like people sometimes are afraid to try something new or go for something out of fear of failure. And you've actually touched on that sometimes the best moments or, moments come from challenging times or through adversity. So have there been moments of challenge or even failure that later became foundational to your success?
Absolutely. And I think, like, for example, early on in my career as a research scientist, experiments failing, oh, that really destroys sometimes your year, because sometimes you're working months to build this system up and then it fails. But also about the opportunities missed. But for me, myself, some what I consider to be the hardest failures were actually in moments where I was not able to help others, even when I knew that challenges would come back or arise in my absence. Those moments have taught me resilience and gave me knowledge. And it gave me hope that all of the hard work I would have done with those people and those colleagues and members of staff, that would help them to help themselves and improve the systems and ensure that the right thing in the right way was being done, in particular when I could not be there anymore to help them. But also sometimes you have to remove yourself from a system to empower others, because sometimes that is true leadership, is to let others push on and continue or complete the change. And I think that it reminds me often that failure is not actually the opposite of success. It's part of the journey to success. I think someone quite famous, or there is some famous quote along of the lines of, what it is success if you haven't experienced failure. And with all of this comes knowledge. And I think that is a true asset, because knowledge stays with you forever. And I think is the most valuable asset you can carry. And I say that as a scientist, hoping that, as we get older, we don't lose memory and these sort of things. But that's the scientist in me thinking of the worst case scenario already.
Yeah. And so we've touched on, right, failure. You've just spoken about failure there and challenge, and through our experience, through maybe it challenges as well through our experiences. But if we look at the flip side, how do personal background and lived experiences contribute to innovation and problem solving in science?
I think different cultures and different communities do things in different ways. And what might be a problem for one group is not a problem for another, and is opportunity and excitement for another subset, or when these communities come together. So I think that diversity also allows you to really assess what the challenges might be and how you tackle it in different ways. So I think that's quite important, and it really drives a lot of innovation, because my experience is I've had situations where I had scientists or experts from the most remote parts of the world and communities coming together, and that's when masterwork actually happens, and you don't even realize it's happening. Sometimes I even have to only realize about the outstanding deliverables years later.
One thing that a lot of people experience during their career is imposter syndrome, and I feel like that's something that people can experience, whether they're junior and early career starters, or for want of a better word, they've made it to the top, they're chief executive or some sort of C-suite. I feel like imposter syndrome can actually still creep in. So in fields where you don't see many people who look like you. How have you navigated imposter syndrome?
I think for me, it's been by making peace with it, because, like you mentioned, imposter syndrome creeps up anytime, anywhere. And I think if you deeply care about your work, self-doubt is natural at all levels. And then also, as you become more and more responsible for others, and you're always more at the cusp of innovation and development, you are navigating the unknown, and often turning innovation and the unknown and the new into business as usual. So this imposter syndrome thing is going to come at you often hard and deep too. And I think the key for me is trying to make peace with it, not to silence it, but not to try and let it control you. It's a little bit like managing emotions and difficult times. And I have to say that imposter syndrome is pretty normal in everybody, and some colleagues who are mental health experts do tell me that those who are certain of everything and do not have self-doubt and so on, there's possibly something clinical going on with them. So
Oh, really? Do you know what? I've never heard that actually. That's important. When you talk about, if I may just delve in a bit there, when you talk about making peace with it, are you referring to acknowledging it and then just going through it? What does it mean to make peace with it?
I think from my perspective, making peace with it is that, for example, not so long ago, I did a whole lot of exams on the route to becoming a chartered director, which is pretty tough. And for those people in finance and economics, they are used to being chartered accountants. They would know how tough it is. And it's not, you have to really work for it. And the imposter syndrome creeps up and tells you, oh, you got lucky, you passed, and you passed with good marks because the exam was easier this time. It wasn't as hard as... So that's the imposter syndrome coming to you. So I've made peace many years ago that whenever I achieve something, I'm automatically going to do that to myself. So I let myself go through that process, but then develop the skill at the end to kind of beat myself back into shape, saying, well, I didn't achieve it by luck, because if it was by luck, if I hadn't studied, if I haven't done this and that, my luck would have been to not get the qualification or deliver on whatever I was trying to deliver on. So, and I found it as I got more and more senior in my career, and even, in particular in the C-suite level where I've been for, I think, close to 10 years. I'm now feeling my age. As the chiefs, that imposter syndrome can grow quite exponentially, can become quite a monster. And I think when I say making peace with it is managing and handling it. I don't think I could ever get rid of it. In my personal opinion, for myself, I don't know how it would be for others.
Yeah. And so you said something there that now makes me realize why earlier you mentioned that you make your own luck. You make your own luck. So how do you respond to the narrative that success is luck rather than the result of preparation and hard work?
Well, I often smile, and I smile and have a little chat with the person or with the people, and just say that opportunity plays a part, but it's really the preparation, persistent, and showing up when others wouldn't. That really matters, because I think luck tends to visit those who are ready and willing. And in my environment, because I work with a lot of scientists and who are healthcare practitioners and registered and regulated professionals, but I often work in an environment where it's very easy to say, for example, to a nurse or to a physician, would have you become a hematologist or a surgeon if you just let luck to write your exams or do your surgeries, and then suddenly there's this realization that what they see is just the tip of the iceberg. Often people only see your successes, They don't see, it's like the iceberg, you just see the tip, you don't see everything else that goes underneath it. And we need to show more of that, because life is not always the social media glamorous life. I have to confess, just last night I was studying again and going through about 50 pages of analysis and so on, because this morning I was in a 3-hour exam again, um, and I was in my PJs with my hair up and, pink PJs, but still, not looking that glamorous.
Isn't it interesting actually how people see a lot? They might see a lot of roles or where people are, but not the work that goes behind it. The amount of the amount of input that goes behind it. And so, what advice would you give to others battling self-doubt in high pressure, high achieving, or high achievement environments?
I would say for people to remember that nobody feels confident all the time. And just like I mentioned before, I've been told by many healthcare, mental health healthcare professionals that if someone is certain that they are always right all the time, there is a problem in there. And I think remind really yourself that what matters is showing up with honesty and transparency. And I think when you are battling your self-doubt, just remind yourself of, for example, Margaret Thatcher once said something along the lines that always stuck with me. And what she said was along the lines that being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to say that you are one, you're not. And I guess in a sense, being successful and so on is a little bit like that. So if you are questioning yourself about your successes, it mostly means that you have done it right. So, and I think with confidence is quite similar to what Margaret Thatcher said, and I think it involves a lot of courage. And I think courage is never about the absence of doubt. I think is about the choice to act and try, accepting that you may succeed or fail, but take that failure as a success for next time to learn. Lessons learned is always great, my perspective.
Yeah, it's that important message again about just go for it, just try it. You only miss the opportunities you don't take or the things that you haven't done. And even that study that you mentioned about those born in the 80s and the one thing that came, or 60s, the one thing that came up is the regret of not just going for it or trying. So
Yeah, so you'll always regret the things you didn't do.
Yeah.
If you don't ask or try, the answer is always no. And I've always seen it, and I've always asked of my staff, students, trainees, anybody, colleagues. So I've always asked of those, whether they report into me or I report into them, all parts of the structure, that as long as we do it with respect and honesty, I would never have a problem with any of that being challenged or being tried with respect and honesty. That's never an issue. It's not necessarily what happens all the time, to be honest.
Yeah. And so we're going to touch on a bit of, we're going to touch on profession versus identity. I feel like the two can become quite blurred for some people. And so your role as Chief Scientific Officer is incredibly important, but how do you keep it from defining you completely?
That's always something that is always in my mind. And the reason is because, most of us, vast majority of us work full time. So that's most of our time. And I try to remind myself that a job title is temporary. Although I absolutely love what I do, and I couldn't be more prouder of all of our team and staff who keep literally their science saves lives every single day, and that is from newborn babies to patients with cancer and so on. The job title is temporary, but the person that I am and the person you are is long lasting. And I think I have to think that, the way I laugh, my friends, my dog, my instinct to help others, those are constants in my life. It doesn't matter whether I'm a chief scientific officer, a CEO, a trainee scientist, or a student. I also reflect often because it's very easy for your profession to become your identity. And I never forget that once at a quite privileged event where a lot of people were coming together to become very generous for some charitable causes. I was asked by quite a prominent person of, he just turned around and said, and what do you do? And I replied to say, oh, not very much, I'm just a housewife. To which this person laughed and he said, well, being a housewife is a very, very big job. Of course, that was not the case, and these people are highly briefed, so they knew who I was and what I did. But I think what really followed on from that in that situation was very genuine conversations, it was really not about us and who we were, and it was about the causes that led us, the circumstances that led us to that cause and to support it. And I often find that those are the connections and the friendships that become long-lasting and forged for a lifetime, where, is on the basis of you, the self, and not just because of the job you do, which is also an important part of your life.
Yeah, it is an important part of your life. And I think, as you say, it's so important to be proud of your achievements. But I think also, to your point, it's so important to acknowledge other things outside of your profession, because, careers can be a roller coaster. And so if for one reason something doesn't work out and the role is taken away from somebody, it's so important to remember all of the other things that you are. And so I think that's why that balance is so important. But how do you balance being proud of your profession with nurturing other parts of your identity?
I think it's by accepting that everything has to be prioritized and priorities shift. I think some days my profession, science, takes center stage, and I'm quite fortunate to live in a very stable community and family environment. So that means in my case, that takes center stage most times, or most of the time, in fact. And I think other days is that family or health must come first, because guess what? We are all humans at the end of the day. And I think finding a balance between these things is not easy, and the balance will never be perfect. But perhaps that's by design, and that imperfect balance is what keeps us as humans curious, interested, agile, and makes life worth living, really, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what do you do outside of science that makes you feel most like yourself?
Well, I have to say, I really enjoy walks with my husband and our dog. That's something I really look forward to at the end of each day, in particular when we are home. You will often find that after an hour or so, or well, if it was the dog's way, at least a 2-hour walk, you'll find us stopping at some really traditional coffee or tea place around of where we might live, and you might find me stuffing myself with cake, because I mean, I'm one of those. Cake was made for trying. I travel. I am quite feminine, I must say. I do indulge on spa time and manicures and things and such like that. I like to read, and it's mostly about science and history of science and evidence. I'm fascinated by it. Go figure. I don't know. I was born with a brain like that. I think, to me, but with all of that, what's most important to me outside work, which gets taken into work, is being part of a close-knitted community, and the community that surrounds me, and that is whether it's helping our neighbour with, changing a fence post because it's too heavy for them, but we are young enough and strong enough to do it, or raising funds for a local rehabilitation centre, or being on Scrubs doing DIY, finally trying to finish our house renovations. It's just those small acts of connection that keep me grounded. And I have to say, if you ever knock at my door at a weekend, you'll probably find me answering the door covered in paint or something, because it's been nearly 4 years on. We are close to finish renovating a house that we bought. Was built in 1903, and that does take time. So being covered in paint outside work is probably how you would find me.
I know how much of a relief that will be once the renovation is complete, because they end up double the time if you ever have to do it. So I'm sure it's going to be.
And I'm pretty sure when it's completed, something else will make it very clear that he needs doing.
I love that. Well, those are the main questions. So thank you so much, Renata. But I actually do this thing, right, at the end of each interview, and it's like a quick fire questions. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
Quick fire questions. And they just help people to get to know you a little better. And just,
Go on. Yeah.
You don't have to think too fast. Just the first thing that comes to your head, right? Okay, so here we go. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Lab coat or business suit?
Lab coat. More comfy.
What's the most surprising fact you've learned about the human body?
That skin was an organ. I was 6 years old and I was like, what?
You learned that at 6. Wow. If you weren't in science, what career would you have chosen?
I'll probably be an analyst, mathematical, something like that.
Favorite science fiction movie or series?
Oh, is cartoons. I'm crazy about the little ducks, which I forget the name in English.
What's your go-to comfort food after a long day?
Is my husband makes pasta in a bowl.
Oh, love
Great.
it. Yeah, love it. If you could have dinner with any scientist, past or present, who would it be?
I would actually want to have dinner with Winston Churchill.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's just he used to come out. All of these quotes are outstanding. Just
I'm surprised.
he's not a scientist.
Exactly.
I just fascinated.
I love that. So, favorite place you've traveled for work or research?
For work or research, I have to say the sunny coast in Australia. That was quite nice.
Oh. Early bird or night owl?
Oh, I'm an early bird.
And then last but not least, what is one fun or quirky fact people would be surprised to know about you?
I sing to my dog.
Really?
And I can assure you that my singing is likely to be classified as noise pollution.
No. If you've ever got a recording, I have to hear it. I'm sure the talent is so strong.
My husband has tried to ask me to abolish the dog singing, and I said to him, I'll do anything for him, but not that.
That's funny. And where can people find you?
Oh, well, in a lab, in a coffee shop, but LinkedIn really. It's become, I think, LinkedIn, you can find me there, has become I think what most people of our age these days feel as safer as a social platform.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think, especially for professionals, it's definitely the place to connect. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Renata. This has been such an interesting conversation. As I say, you are the first scientist I've had on here. So I can't wait for everybody to hear this episode.
Well, and if there's anything we can do, even like, I don't know, if you ever want to bring your crew around for us to show you labs and so on, because, if it might help, because we're so grateful for all of the work you did for, the sickle cell work. And, if
that would be amazing.
You might even be able to see your blood hanging and being processed to go and save a baby. I don't know if people realize, but most blood transfusions happen cancer patients, of course, but also mothers giving birth, and a lot of them on unexpected transfusions. Is
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. No, we will. I'll be taking you up on that offer. And just for those that don't know, we did a fundraiser for sickle cell. And one of the important things around sickle cell is blood donation. And so that's what we're referring to there for those that might not know. But I will be taking you up on that offer, Renata. And again, thank you so much for coming on today. And I can't wait for everybody to hear our
No problem.
conversation.
And looking forward to showing you what science is like.
Thank you.
It's like a lot
Amazing.
of people's normal days, hopefully.
Exactly. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.